Hello and welcome to the Daily Brief Show by Zerodha. Here we cut through the noise and bring to you the most important stories that move the markets. I am your host Anurag Bansal, and in today's episode we'll talk about two important stories. In the first story, we'll talk about Maruti Suzuki's quarterly results and what they really tell us about India's automotive sector. And in the second story, we'll talk about how the world is slowly reducing their dependence on coal and moving on to other more renewable resources and what it really means for the larger economy. By the way, this show is also available on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube Music, and also as a video on YouTube. You can choose wherever you consume your content. We also send out a daily brief newsletter every morning that captures the essence of everything we've discussed through the day. If you are interested, you can subscribe through Substack. So let's begin with the first story where we talk about Maruti Suzuki's quarterly results. See, the thing about Maruti is that they have been a dominant market leader in India's passenger vehicle market for a very long time. To give you some context, they currently have a 40% market share in the passenger vehicle segment, while the second placed Hyundai has only a 14% market share. Now, there were some interesting insights in their earnings released, not just about what Maruti is doing, but also about India's automotive sector as a whole. And I want to talk about few of those in today's story. See, starting with the overall performance of Maruti reported a reasonably strong financial performance. Their revenues increased by 10% year on year and net profits went up by 47%. But interestingly, their sales only grew by 5%, which means their profits grew faster than their sales this time. Moving on to some key market trends and insights, Maruti Suzuki saw a very strong growth in exports markets, particularly in the Middle East and Latin American region. Their utility vehicle Jimny became the largest exported model in quarter one. Now, if you followed this show for a while, you would probably remember an older episode where I spoke about Bajaj's CNG plans and how they are betting on their strength, which is CNG vehicles, in a world that is entirely focused on electric vehicles. Now, the increasing demand for CNG vehicles has become a very noticeable trend. Recently, CNG sales have surpassed diesel vehicle sales for the first time. For Maruti, 1 in every 3 cars sold by them are now CNG powered, and CNG's popularity is spreading beyond traditional markets like NCR, Mumbai, and Gujarat to newer states like Rajasthan, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Madhya Pradesh, and even Kerala. A key takeaway from this is that consumer interest is slowly shifting to more economical and environmentally friendly options. Now, this is mainly driven by rising fuel costs and environmental concerns amongst people. Now, another big growth segment for Maruti was their utility vehicle segment. See, Maruti's utility vehicle segment includes bigger cars like Ertiga, Jimny, etc. Now, for Maruti, this segment saw a 30% growth this quarter. Now, this could mean some people are increasingly preferring larger, more versatile, and more comfortable vehicles. Now, in order to tackle the tough market conditions and the impact of heat waves, Maruti Suzuki took some steps to keep sales up and draw in more customers. One of the key moves was to increase their discounts. In quarter 1 of this year, the average discount per vehicle jumped to 21,700 rupees from the previous 14,500 rupees in the previous quarter. Better monsoons and the onset of the festive season might also boost sales for them. Here is what the management said.
There are indeed customers in the market, but might be waiting for an auspicious period or more attractive time or some reasons to make their purchase. We are further increasing our focus on improving retail sales. Going forward, a better monsoon season coupled with the onset of the festive period is...
Now, Maruti's quarterly results also spoke about the rural market and how it outperformed the urban market during this period. Higher agricultural income, government initiatives, and better rural infrastructure likely contributed to this growth. Now, all that aside, the most interesting thing that I found in Maruti's results was their focus on electric vehicles or EVs. Maruti Suzuki is no exception now when it comes to jumping on the EV bandwagon. They recently announced that they will be launching their first EV in January 2025, and this is just the start. They plan to roll out 6 electric vehicle models by 2031 alone. Now, moving on to the second and the final story of the day, let's talk about how the world is slowly getting rid of coal and what it really means for the larger economy. See, in 2023, the world hit a very weird milestone. On one hand, we generated a record amount of electricity globally from coal, while on the other hand, we were able to reduce the share of coal in the world's power mix from 35.7% to 35.4%. Now, I know this reduction might seem a little small in terms of absolute numbers, but trust me, it's actually not. This reduction means that the world is now increasingly taking cognizance of climate change and is shifting away from coal to other renewable sources. In this story today, this shift from coal is exactly what I want to discuss. But before we get into it, let me tell you two of the many reasons why the world is even looking to move away from coal in the first place. See, coal produces the most amount of carbon dioxide per unit of energy as compared to other fossil fuels. Now, as you would have imagined, this is super harsh on the environment. In 2021, coal fired power plants were responsible for more than 20% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And if we have to stop a total collapse of our planet and possibly humanity as well, we really need to get rid of coal based power, and that is not really optional for us. The good news, however, is that the world is making progress. In developed countries, the decline in coal usage has been very sharp. In just 1 year, the US saw coal generation fall by 19%, and the European Union saw it drop by as much as 25%. Now, this is largely due to the rise of renewable sources like wind and solar, and also increase in energy efficiency and other technological improvements. But if you take a look at developing countries, the coal story is very different from that of developed countries today. China, which is the world's biggest coal consumer, increased its coal-fired generation by 5.9% in 2023. India, Vietnam, and Mexico also saw significant increases in this regard. Now, this was mainly due to horrendous heat waves and uneven monsoons across the world, which again are a result of climate change. These intense heat waves affected hydropower generation, which is a key part of the energy mix of the world. So countries like China and India had to substitute the loss of electricity generated from hydropower with power generated from dirty coal. But here is an interesting counterfactual. Under a regular scenario, clean energy addition in 2023 would have reduced fossil generation. However, the shortfall in hydropower led to an increase in coal generation, which eventually led to a 1% increase in global power sector emissions. 95% of the coal generation rise in 2023 was in 4 countries that are severely affected by droughts: China, India, Vietnam, and Mexico. But what is interesting here is that even though China consumes the most amount of coal in the world, it is also the world leader when it comes to renewable energy deployment in everything from electric vehicles to solar energy. Closer to home, India has also set some very ambitious targets for clean energy growth in the coming few years, and we are kind of trying to follow China's example. Now, the main point of discussion here is not whether the countries like India and China can transition away from coal. It is more to do with how quickly this can be done without compromising or hampering the country's development goals. A transition like this is a huge deal. To begin with, we are talking about getting rid of a source that makes up 1/3 of the global energy mix. But apart from that, there are also massive human and economic costs associated with it. For one, most countries can't even transition away from coal right now because even if they wanted to, they can't afford anything else as an alternative. For starters, most countries today can't even transition from coal even if they wanted to because they cannot afford anything else. But hypothetically, even if you did move away from coal, solar and wind can't be the primary source of energy because you cannot depend on it. You really need something that can also fill the gap and be clean at the same time. The only source right now that fulfills both these criteria is nuclear energy, which again is super expensive. It also has a bad reputation because of Chernobyl and Fukushima. But as I said earlier, perhaps the biggest challenge here is financing. Poor and developing countries can't really afford this, and they don't have access to affordable financing even if they intend to go green. But that said, there are numerous benefits of moving away from coal. As a matter of fact, air pollution kills 1 out of 10 people in the world, and coal-based power plants are a leading source of air pollution across the world. Moving away from coal means that we can prevent millions of people from dying and being incapacitated every single year. A healthy population naturally translates to an increased economic productivity. So let's hope we can all get our act together and stop killing ourselves and our planet. Well, that's all the news I have for you today. Today was a relatively shorter episode. I hope you found value in this. See you tomorrow. Take care and goodbye.